This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy. I kind of want to get that, man. So you were talking about when you started writing your books, you were more basically authentic or I guess real with the book, and you saw the book sales increase.
Well, you had just asked a question that people want authenticity and they want transparency, and podcasts like Joe Rogan have been successful that way.
Yep.
So I had an experience 35 years ago when I got into book writing by default, just writing a journal. And the first book was just things I learned in exercise and how it helped me as a person to develop inside. Well, as I continued to write, people would say, I appreciate your honesty. And I'm thinking, well, that's a little bit of it, but there's a lot more. And I'm like, do I really share this? And then I had a steroid addiction with my professional bodybuilding career, and I had a relative that OD'd and passed away. And at the time, I was competing, and I didn't think it was going to happen to me or any of that stuff. And so I decided I wanted to write that book or that experience that I could maybe help young people in the pressures of sports. But I'm like, man, that's a deep subject. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I really want to tell somebody about an addiction to, because back then you just like, we had an old saying that says, if you have to ask, you have no right to know. So people weren't honest about their addictions, especially in professional sports. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write this book. And the theme was, well, the pressures of fitting into a metaphoric locker room that we all have as kids, adults, and all that. And I debated on writing it very raw. But I had been a few books into this career. And I noticed that my book sales increased the more open and honest I was with my writing. Even though it was very difficult.
Right.
What was happening is people could insert themselves and say, hey, I can relate to that. And I really respect him for being honest. And he got through it.
Yep.
And so I guess I just started storytelling because I'm not the greatest writer when it comes to that.
Well, I think it's almost like we're starved for that. You know what I mean? Like we want that authentic conversation. And I think that's why other than there's many reasons, but I think that's one of the big reasons why this last election was so charged as it was. Cause you had, for the most part, you had both sides just kind of saying whatever, there was like no filter. Like back in the past, the previous, elections and things, you would like a politician would say things a certain way, but this time, I mean, they were going on podcasts. They were just, using curse words or whatever it was. And it was just like that. I think that was more of a connection to the people. And I think as a general population, man, just outside of politics, I think we're looking for that, looking for that because, you hear a person you read a person's book or you see a person on TV and it's like, you don't really know who that person is, but then they open up. Do you know who David Goggins is?
Yes.
So his book, I don't know if you've ever read his book or not, but he talks about his story in there. And he taught like before he released the book that like nobody would relate to it. Nobody would read it because it was just, so dark or whatever. But it's like people want that connection, like we don't, like in the world of social media and the virtual calls and the virtual meetings and stuff, it's like we don't have a lot of that connection anymore, I feel like.
Well, what's interesting is with social media, we have more connection, but we don't have more connection. We don't have that human aspect. Yep. And we are craving transparency, authenticity.
Yep.
And my career blossomed in different forms. When I decided, I got an email from a lady in Australia in 2001.
Mm.
And I was going through a book writing mental block, and you get those things in your head from your past of people aren't going to read your work, even if they're just not going to do it. And this lady said, "Thank you for sharing your story when my son needed to hear it the most."
Mm.
And so I decided in my book writing career to be a storyteller
Right.
of myself and the stories I've learned from other people. And it was very fascinating, Cody, to see the more it was almost like in their pupils. The more transparent and authentic you were, the more their attention. I mean,
Right.
it was like because they were craving it. They're just saying, "Give me something that I can relate to. That I'm not the only one going through this." Whether it's personal development, spirituality, exercise. I mean, you name it.
Right.
And if you are in a service business or if you're in a podcast host or whatever it is, I always encourage people just be real. Just don't just you're better off just to ad lib it because a producer friend of mine told me when I had a couple television shows was don't say too much so the audience can insert their life into the middle. So don't complicate it too much. Because if
Right.
you say it too much or you're not yourself, they can't insert their own life into that.
Mm.
So yeah, we need more of that. And you found that out in the politics world. You found out, and here's another interesting thing. I'm going off tangent, but it's still the same message. In the business world that I took my vehicles, exercise and coaching and speaking and book writing, I had different income levels of people in different levels.
Right.
And I found out over the years, the more truth, it's not that I lied or anything, but the more forward, I just didn't cut them any slack and say, you know what, in all due respect, this is the way it is, whatever.
Mm.
I found that, and I don't know how this is going to sound, but the higher income level of people, the more respect and truth they wanted or could handle.
Right. Exactly.
Or could handle. And
Yep.
that had to maybe do with their self confidence or the money. I don't know what it was. But then I realized from a business standpoint, the more authentic I was with my coaching, the busier I became.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that theme we're talking about is that transparency and authenticity, whatever vehicle you have. You're a podcaster, Joe Rogan, whatever. Just stick to who you are. And that's the other thing I think that is a good thing to talk about is that once you discover who you are, you won't have to worry about scripting anything.
Yeah. Well, so I want you to tell us who you are and introduce yourself. But before we do that, because I always ask people to introduce themselves, and I want to make sure that you get that opportunity. But before we do that, just to kind of close the loop on this, you were talking about business, and that's 100% true, man. Because I remember when I started my business, my landscaping company, like I was 20 years old. I didn't really know. I didn't know I didn't know what the hell was going on. But like I remember trying to like phrase things a certain way or say things a certain way. And I mean, I'm sure you know this. There's so many different problems with that. First of all, man, if you in the business world, if you're not at the very least neutral and standing up for yourself, you can get eaten alive. But like you're talking about these people that respect you more when you sort of not disrespect, but just stand strong on your ground. That's 100% true because there's been times where I've been hired for a job just because I was more open and whatever the thing was. And you're talking about these people with high income, the high income thing, and these big companies and stuff. The main thing I feel like from my perspective and my experience has been to be a problem solver for these people, and they will keep you around. And you can't be a problem solver if you're not, willing to address these things out in the open and say, hey, listen, this is, and maybe it was, even if it's something that you did, like, hey, I messed this up. This is the way that I think we could fix this. I'm not saying go around just tell people problems. I think it's a good idea to address a problem and also provide a possible solution. But Yeah, I think that's 100% true, man. When you I mean, you hear this like in dating and stuff too. When you respect your own boundaries, the other person respects you more.
Yeah.
Um, I think the problem is like I don't know what would be the problem. How do we even get here? Like, how do we get to the place where everything's almost so fabricated, and it's like I don't even know how we got to this point. But I guess the good news is we're sort of shifting that, and people are starting to see things a little bit differently because, like on social media and stuff, you're starting to see companies like CEO companies, speak out more and more on things. Talking about Joe Rogan, I don't know if you saw that Mark Zuckerberg came out and was talking about the Facebook policy. Now he could be just kind of trying to change sides on us, but he did come out and say that that Facebook did not handle some things as far as the censorship and stuff like that goes. And so I don't know. You just see people more and more having these open conversations.
Well, I think a little bit about my background, the backstory. It's a long story, but I defaulted, got into the exercise business, going to college here in the Midwest. Uh, a guy put his hand on my back the first day in the gym, and all I needed was a little bit of coaching.
Right.
3 years later, I was on covers of bodybuilding magazines
Okay.
because this guy believed in me before I believed in myself.
Yeah.
And so over the years, that I parlayed that into business, book writing, other companies. I retired out of the blue after I wrote that book, and then I got into performance coaching in different areas, business development, then the book writing, and all that. So I've had a diverse career, but at the beginning, the vehicle was the exercise. But over time, as I got to know who I was as a person, those pieces of the pie of a book writing vehicle or a professional coaching or business development or author or artist, whatever it was, that happened organically. The vehicle was the exercise. Then I found my identity in other things, and then I started discovering who I was. And then once I did that, everything changed
Hmm.
because that was the glue. And you asked the question, you said, what have we lost? And I think people ask me that a lot. And this is the exact answer: lack of self worth.
Hmm.
If you narrow down everything, it comes back to either we don't feel we're worth it, either we've been told we weren't worth it, or we've convinced ourselves we weren't worth it, and we've hidden behind the social media, and we've lost that connection with human interaction, which doesn't help.
Mhm.
But it comes down to self-worth. And when you discover who you are, the self-worth kind of builds on its own. So let me give you a story that parlays into what you said about people just, no matter the income level, wanting help.
Okay. Hey, hang on before you do that. Let me ask you this. You look a little dark on my end. Is there like a way you can shift your light? I just want to make sure that you can. Um.
Boy, it is a little dark.
Hey,
Is that better?
that's a little better. Yeah, I'm not sure if so on the when the video finalizes, it'll be a little bit brighter. I just want to make sure that you can, if you hit like if you can see yourself.
That might even be worse. Yeah, dark. I should have put on a different shirt.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you're fine with that, we'll roll. I just wanted to make sure that you, like I said, that you can see yourself. But I didn't mean to cut you off. You were talking about the high income levels and the
Yeah,
respect.
and we were also talking about what's missing with self worth,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Well, as I continued my career, I connected with a lot of high profile people, and I when I got into bodybuilding here in the Midwest, I decided to pursue a dream in Los Angeles, California, of all places. And I took $200 to my name, and I drove out in 1988 to Los Angeles, California, with no job.
Hmm.
wanting to be this exercise person. Well, out there, you're the little fish in a big pond.
Mhm.
So anyway, 2 weeks later, I got hired by a lady named Kathy Smith. And at that time, Kathy Smith was the guru of home videos with Jane Fonda. So I come into this health club where all these movie stars are. And I'm this Midwestern boy. And 6 months after I got the job, I asked Kathy, I said, why did you hire me? And she says, you were different from everybody else here. I don't say that braggingly,
Right.
but they felt the authenticity then in LA. So I got hired my first big job, which parlayed into celebrity clients and all that, because I was just different. I had started to discover myself already.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's forward 30 years later. Well, no, 2011. I'm in Denver, Colorado, finishing a book in the mountains, and I was going through a tough time with forgiveness of past, um, just different things. No alcohol, no drugs, no nothing, just some past stuff. And it was just a dip in the road. And I got this call one day out of the blue from a lady that was a caretaker for a high profile individual. And I met the guy 12 hours later after I got this phone call. And to be truth be known, I was kind of living out of my car in the mountains of Colorado. It was kind of fun for a while, but I just, it was a bad time in my life, a divorce and all this stuff. So I'm like, there's a direction I was going. I didn't know I was going to go in. And so I'm just a little confused. And I met this guy, and I won't mention any names, but it was an owner of a national football team. And a couple of months into it, um, I was told that the reason I was hired is because all they wanted me to do was to uh, put my hand basically on the back of this gentleman and treat him like a person. So now, if you step back, here's this guy that was going through a really tough time.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this billionaire football owner who needed some help with nutrition and exercise, and he's since passed away. He had Alzheimer's, that's known and all that. So why does that in 24 hours get inserted into that level, that drastic level? And the lady said, because we just wanted you to treat him like a human being. So that was an interesting one too, is that it doesn't matter economic level.
Right.
We all can be inserted in somebody's life if we're transparent and authentic. Because the reason that conversation came up, because I went to them and I said, I think I need to talk to you about something. And they said, what? And I said, well, I wasn't at a very good spot when you hired me. And they're like, well, why would you tell me that? Tell us that. I said, well, maybe you want to fire me. Maybe I'm not the right person based on that. And they said, all we wanted was a person to treat him like a regular human being. And I spent 9 years with him, Super Bowl, all that because of transparency and authenticity. But I had to be at a point in my life where none of that other status stuff mattered. I had to get back to developing my own self. It's not what you want out of life, it's who you are.
Right.
Once you find out who you are, the other stuff kind of just falls into place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very intriguing story, man. So I had a direction I wanted to go before this, but now I'm not so sure.
That's
I guess
okay.
let me ask. Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned self-worth kind of being the reason that maybe we don't have this, this level of authenticity. or this self-confidence is the reason that we can't be authentic. What do you think, how does a person develop that to then be authentic? Or they authentic first and then it comes as a byproduct? I mean, what do you think? How does so if we're at a place where we can't be authentic and open and we can't, we have an employer or whoever it is, how do you recommend a person, I don't want to say fix, but just maybe change that? Like, what can we do about that?
Well, I mean, you got to be comfortable in your own skin. You hear that all the time. But my faith in my Creator helps me out a lot with that because I grew up pleasing everybody. That was my mantra. I had to fit in. And I realized when the bodybuilding came along and I'm shooting up this steroid in me, I'm like, am I willing to do this just because I want to fit in? Is that really worth it? And I realized that nobody was worth that. Nobody was worth me trying to fit in with. So that's one thing. You got to realize that it's not, you can love people, but you don't have to sacrifice your own self just to fit into some locker room metaphoric space.
Right.
With that. So my faith has a lot to do with that. Personal experiences that is like, you just get to a point where it's like, what a waste, because they'll forget about you 30 seconds after, something happens.
Yep.
And then, the other thing too is I didn't want to be 70 years old and have these regrets of what I didn't do, because elderly people, the number one thing they say is, it's not what I did, it's what I didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to look back and say, well, Jane or Susie influenced me so much that this part of my life was, so, over time, you have to get to the point where you're okay with who you are. And the other thing too is, Cody, and I think this is very important, I discovered my spiritual gifts. I discovered what I was good at. I wasn't good at book writing. People are like, what? I can't write very well. I got a dyslexia. But what I discovered is I'm a great storyteller. So I can get somebody else to write the books off of my story.
Right.
So that's the other thing. Discover what you're good at. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. You might be, for me, I'm good at empathy. I can put myself in somebody else's shoes. I'm good at discernment. I'm good at encouragement. And then I just took my gifts and made it business of services that fit my gifts. And then that was like a double thing where that even helped my self-worth out even more, because I was following what I was really made of. I wasn't trying to see your spiritual gifts or your gifts might be something different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started a company 20 years ago that dealt with the elderly and wellness. That was a concierge business, like a Uber wellness thing for people that were living at home still that didn't want to go in a nursing home. Well, none of my peers wanted to work with that age group. Well, I had good empathy skills. From a business standpoint, I had 100% market share because none of my peers wanted to do it. It wasn't glamorous, but over time it became very lucrative because I took my gift of empathy and connected it to a certain market and parlayed that into money. So that's the other thing. You need to discover your gifts for what you're really good at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you discover your purpose, or you discover a gift about yourself and you say that you are supposed to do that thing, then that gives you the message that is your mission. And then by default, I think that gives you a sense of purpose. And then by extension, I think a sense of self-worth. And then you also mentioned too, like being comfortable in your own skin. I think I agree with that, because nobody else can be you. You know what I mean? Like, nobody else of the 8 billion plus people that are here, there's never going to be another you.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, you're talking about fitness, and we were talking about, the different levels of income and wealth and that kind of thing. I think both in the business and the wealth building space and in the fitness space, I think there's almost a consensus that people who have a high level of wealth usually have some sort of disciplined fitness routine. People that build wealth usually have, they're very fit, they're very disciplined, and they have a program. So, what do you think it is with that? I mean, what do you think the connection is between a fitness plan or a health plan or something, and then you know, financial success and wealth?
Well, for me, I had an attitude when I first started off. If I could just exercise one day,
Mm-hmm.
smallest guy on the football team, all this stuff. If I could just do it one day, then I'll figure it out tomorrow. I had the Groundhog Day effect. I just forgot everything until the next day. Well, I did that for 4 years. The next thing I know, I'm a professional bodybuilder. The discipline that came with that. But my answer to that question is, I think, is that these, whatever income level you are, there is a discipline, but they don't do it for the results. They do it for the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very good key because most of us do it for the results.
Right.
I did it for the day.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have told me that I would have won this bodybuilding title at 21 years old in Detroit, Michigan, I would have just told you no, and I'm quitting. There's just no way.
Right.
But I exercised one day at a time. And next thing I know, the end results happen because of the one day. People don't become rich or wealthy looking at wanting to make $1 million. They become rich and wealthy because they find out what their gifts are, they're good at, and they find a problem and they solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And they just do that one day at a time. But if you focus on the end, you don't do the middle.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
really does come down to that one day at a time.
Yeah, I think the process is really important, man. And I don't think there's many things that will teach you that like fitness or like building a business. It's the process along the way. I mean, it's what it takes to get there.
And that was another thing. It's on the same tangent. Was that exercise and bodybuilding is a mental game too. It is a physical game,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a very mental game too. And I wrote down on a piece of paper 150 times a day, I am Mr. Michigan. The day I first wrote that, I didn't believe that I could ever do it because I'm a teenager.
Right.
The day I won my show, I peaked 1 hour before I went on stage.
Mm-hmm.
The pencil went to my belief system, went to my physiology, and changed me within the hour of a 4-year process. You got to see yourself successful too,
Mm-hmm.
which comes back to the self-worth. You can't see yourself successful if you don't believe you're worthy of it.
You know what's crazy, man, is like, so we have all these, different medications and drugs on the market, and they literally do a test, like for a placebo test, where people will get the actual medication, and then people will get, some other sugar pill or whatever it is, and they use that in their testing because they know that if people believe they're getting that medication or that thing and it's going to change something in their body, they have to account for those effects. So like we know scientifically that you can literally change your body physiologically just by thinking of something, like thinking, a certain way about yourself, or like you eat this thing, it's going to do this to me. Like that's a thing. And so it just makes sense that if we think that we can achieve this goal, or for you, this bodybuilding championship, this title, if we think that can literally, I mean, it literally changes us. It changes our body. And then I think that's how we start. Is I think we start internally. We change it internally. We change how we see ourselves, what we think is possible, and then we go make it happen. But I
Well,
mean,
I always joke and tell people, you can talk yourself into anything. You do it with the bad stuff. Why can't you do it with the good stuff?
yeah, yeah,
So we'll believe anything.
right.
So if you don't believe something and you want to believe something, just keep talking yourself into it. Sooner or later,
Mm-hmm.
I am Mr. Michigan. I mean, I went from no way, no how, ain't going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
to, man, I could maybe compete again. Wow, I maybe could win this thing. Oh, wow, I peaked the day of the event. what happened was the writing down convinced my psychology, which convinced my belief system. And once that belief system is, and you know these people know this, you can almost tell instantly results the minute, second you believe it. There's just something that happens that you just, but there's a process, and either whatever that process is.
Well, I think so. I think people they hear that and they think, because there's a big big talk these days about manifesting and visualizing and this kind of thing, and those things are powerful. But I think the problem is that people just think about it and then they don't do the work. They don't do the action. You mentioned your faith. Is that the Christian faith?
Is that what?
Is that the Christian faith? Are you a Christian?
I
You
am.
consider yourself-
I am a
Okay.
believer. I'm not religious. I'm a believer. I think there's a
Okay.
difference.
Okay. Well, so I was just gonna reference. There's a verse in the Bible that says something like "knock and the door will be opened for you," something along those lines. But I don't know anywhere in the Bible, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, but I don't know anywhere in the Bible where it says "knock and the Lord will walk through the door for you." It says "knock and the door will be open for you." So it's your job to go through the door. It's your job to do the work. And it's like I tell people too, man. You hear like, "I don't chase, I attract." Well, okay, by definition, if you chase something, it's running from you. So I get that. I understand that we don't want to chase anything. But if you attract something, if you say I just attract what's supposed to be for me, then that means if anything does come to you, because what that means is you're going to sit there until something comes to you. But if something does come to you, it's going to be a very low resolution of what's possible for you if you went out and created a thing. So I tell people all the time, like, yeah, don't chase, but also don't attract. Go create. I think that's what we should be focused on.
On what? Focused on which part?
So we're talking about visualizing, we're talking about manifesting, believing for ourselves. I mean, the belief in ourselves is a major portion of it's a major part of it. But if we don't follow up with the action, of what it takes to make those things, like in your case, you would have never got that title or that championship had you not been in the gym. I mean, you can't just think that I'm gonna, be this champion person or this successful business owner and not do the work that it takes.
Right. With my faith, personally, I never pray, Lord, give me this, or God, give me this, or whatever.
Right.
I pray for the opportunity. Then that's my job and my self-worth to act on it. This goes full circle in this conversation. The action comes from the self-worth. If people don't have a self-worth about themselves, they're not confident enough to act. And what do? We default and point our finger at everybody else and say,
Yep.
Whether it's God, Junior, whatever, why didn't you give me this? Well, first of all, you had every opportunity. You just didn't act on it. Well, why didn't you act on it? Well, maybe because the confidence level wasn't where it should be. So it's a full circle. So for me, especially this time in my career, I'm like, just give me an opportunity. I'll take it from here because I'm listening, doing all this. And in the Bible, it does say, seeking you shall find, knocking it will be open unto you. But it doesn't say it's going to do it for you.
Right. Right. Nor should it. I mean, I think that should be I mean, listen, here's the thing, man. And look, a person might not believe in God, and that's fine. But let's just say a higher power, let's say the universe, let's say whatever. So like you believe in yourself. And if you pray to God, or if you ask the universe for it, or whatever your thing is, and this opportunity is presented to you, that higher power, whatever that is for you, is on your side because it presented the opportunities to you. So like, yes, self-belief is a big part of it, but then when you have something like that is on your side, that is giving this opportunity to you, I just feel like that should be very empowering to us to say, okay, you know what? This being, whether it's God or the universe, whoever you want to see it as, gave me this opportunity. So this person that is much bigger than any of us are gave me this opportunity. So like that right there, like just saying that, if I and I know that sounds like a pretentious, grandiose thing to say, oh, this opportunity was given to me by God, but it's like if you pray for that, or if you meditate on that, whatever it is for you, and it's given to you, I mean, I think at the very least we should try to pursue that thing, because if we don't, that's disrespectful to the higher power. But that is empowering, and that's a huge part. If you have that, the respect, Yeah, I think it would be respect for that opportunity given to you by a higher power, and then the belief in yourself, and then the action to make it happen. That's the blueprint for success right there. I mean,
One of the things I keep back in my mind is, and this is where the empathy comes in at. Let's say I give you a compliment, and you might say, "Well, that shirt I'm wearing, I just picked it out of the closet." Instead of just saying thank you,
mhm,
if you keep telling me, "Well, that's an old shirt," guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to somebody else who will give me a thank you,
right,
because you're not making me feel very good by just making some excuse. Just say thank you. I bought a guy a cup of coffee a couple of days ago, and he didn't know how to take it. And I said, just say thank you, because it makes me feel good. Well,
right,
what does God do? God might say, well, if you don't be grateful for it, if you don't take this opportunity, I might just go to somebody else who will.
yep,
So here's another example. When I was in the NFL professional sporting arena, I got a firsthand view of the back end of the business side of professional sports. And unfortunately, we're living in a world now where entitlement in sports has become a big forefront.
yep.
Well, the average NFL player is broke within the first 2.5 years of his contract.
Wow,
We give them financial planners, we give them all of this. And when I first got hired on in this arena, there was $100 million checks being written to upfront money to these professional football players.
mhm,
Well, the NFL is run totally different than any other business. But I come to understand the next 3 or 4 years, the only real money that these athletes are growing up to think is real money is upfront money. Then why are they broke 3.5 years later? My point is they didn't earn it. They
right.
didn't sacrifice for it. They didn't plan for it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying when you don't do that, like the point you were making, we have to go out there, and our self pride has to give us that feeling of accomplishment. And that comes from self worth too. I think that's part of why we don't have a lot of self worth, because we don't, a lot of times, a lot of people don't work for that end results. You just feel good when you work and accomplish something. You don't feel good if you're given something. You just don't. You might think you do,
Yeah,
but
and
you don't.
man, yeah, that's such a good point because we are in that space now. We have the 2-day delivery on Amazon and 1-day delivery in some cases, and we have all these different overnight. This is overnight mentality. We get on social media and we see the guy on Instagram who's got the Lamborghini and the pretty girl and everything, and it looks like it was an overnight thing. But it's like I think that's almost like an infectious mindset. This sort of gotten a lot of all of us really because um, we just think these things are supposed to be quick and easy, and if we do it and it's not quick and easy, then we want to move on to something else, and then we're just continuously chasing this thing that really doesn't exist because it doesn't happen overnight. And I think I don't know. It's like we're just in this fast paced world, and everything's like right now, right now. We got mobile deliveries everywhere you go. Every restaurant, there's a pickup. It's just like everything's got to be right now. But I think it's crazy that you mentioned that because you would think, just from the outside looking in, we think about these athletes and these superstars and stuff, and these musicians or whatever, and they have all this money. We're like, well, oh, they got it figured out. But uh, that's a good point, man. I mean, that's not a good point. That's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was that's a good statistic to hear because you don't think about that. You don't think about like what percentage of these people who are given this upfront don't have it. I mean, think about like lottery winners. Somebody wins lottery and then what? A year later, if that, they're broke again.
Yeah. It's inheritance, whatever you want to think. If there's not earned, there's no self esteem there. It's going to
Huh?
go through your fingers, and it's going to go to the people that work for it. It's just how the law, how it all works. And in football, they don't understand. They come in there, they sign this contract. Well, first of all, Pop Warner. They start with Pop Warner. They get you go and you get a free scholarship. Now you get NIL deals, and then
Mm,
you get upfront money. You haven't. I mean, yeah, you earned it as far as your skill level,
Right.
But now you get $1 million. Okay, you buy a ghost, go buy a ghost for a couple of your friends. You buy a house for your family, and then you take your friends on a Caribbean trip. And then all of a sudden you get hurt because you're a lineman and you spend most of your career going backwards. And and then the NFL goes, "We're done."
Hmm.
Well, wait a minute. No, 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 you're done. Your contract's over with. It's a very cutthroat business. Well, I don't have any money left. You know,
Hmm.
the Peyton Mannings of the world, the Tim Tebow's, the some of these guys that some of these guys are putting their marketing money or their sponsorship money aside and just spending the other part, or vice
Right.
versa, which is very
Right.
smart.
Hmm.
And we always said to the players, we said, just spend some of it, give the rest of it to your financial planner. But there was no self worth because they didn't earn it. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, becoming a person in that process is huge, man.
ah,
Like I say in the business, like in the business on the business perspective a lot. Everybody thinks they want to be a business owner. Everybody thinks they want to be a CEO, the top paid person of the company, have their own company, my favorite one is set your own hours. Oh, you set your own schedule. That's my favorite one. I mean, but people think they want to be in this situation, man, but it's like the person that you have to become to be in this position and stay in this position and be successful in this position. Like that's all these people, CEOs, leaders of companies, they do great things, but becoming that person is the job. That's the job. I heard who's the guy? I think it's Alex Hermosi, I think is his name. He speaks on social media and stuff. I think he said that when you talk about being the 1%, like being a 1%, performer or whatever, you're doing the 1%, like what the 1% does, and that's not just the work. That's like making the sacrifices outside of work. That's doing the things to yourself. That's growing, improving yourself. And so it's like it's easy for us to be on the outside and look in and say, man, I want to be. We just want what the person has. We want the title or the income or whatever, but we don't want. A lot of us don't want to be that person that it takes to make that happen. And that's where the magic is, man. And we talk about the self improvement, personal growth journey. That's where it's all at, right there.
here's a funny story. I got married 7 years ago, and first of all, I've never had a boss. I've never had a
Okay.
boss. I mean, I
Okay.
just don't have that in me. Nobody's going to tell me how much I'm worth. I mean, I'll live in my car for 6 months before somebody's going to tell me how much I'm worth.
Right.
I married this blue collar worker, and she doesn't mind if I tell you the story. She'd never had a business of her own.
Hmm.
So she started this business organically with flowers and stuff, and it was a hobby. And over the first couple of years, I'm like, and she was just evolving, and her
Right.
personality was changing. It was just so gratifying to watch. And a couple of weeks ago, it's on a Sunday afternoon, and I said, it's relaxed time or it's football time, whatever. She goes, I can't. I'm thinking about my business, and I'm like, welcome to my world.
Yep.
And I laughed about that because she had evolved to realizing that I'm not a blue collar worker anymore, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that transition to a business owner took her 3 years to get to that point to realize I'm married to this. This
Mm-hmm.
is a 24/7 job. You can't turn off your brain.
Yep.
It's just who you are. People are like, well, you can go on vacations, you can do all this whenever you want.
Hmm.
Yeah, but the sacrifice is that business is it's a 24/7 business. And I think personal development is the same thing. I don't think you can slack on that either.
Well, it's definitely a continuous thing, man. Like it definitely is. It's never ending. Like and that's the connection I always make to fitness, because you don't really like you can become a fit person, but if you don't continue to be a fit person, you're no longer going to be a fit person. So if you
Have you
don't, if
have you ever experienced where you don't do a pull up once in a while or every so often? You don't do a push up. I mean,
I,
it's like, where did that go?
yeah, yeah, the biggest one is cardio. If you run or swim or whatever it is that you do, and you don't do that for a couple weeks, you feel it the next time you go back to do it.
I went out to shovel snow yesterday. I come back in and Sandy, my wife's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're right. You have to exercise your body. You have to exercise your brain. You have to exercise your
Hmm.
spiritual side. And there's no. And I think that goes back to the purpose and the self-worth. When you have that, that's the glue for all the other stuff on the down days.
Yep.
Because let's face it, there's times we don't want to be the boss
Mm-hmm.
or the leader, or we don't want to go exercise, or we don't want to do this. But the purpose and the self-worth says, you know what? I'm going to keep doing this a little bit longer. I'm going to have some tough days, but I'm going to get back. There's 3 times in my life, in my 40-year career, I went through some really tough times, my own accord.
Mm-hmm.
But the exercise, I went back and I went, well, I just get up tomorrow morning and just start over.
Yeah.
Just like I did with exercise. I did have a very good day. I didn't get the pump. I didn't eat very well. I didn't sleep very well, or my cardio was off, or whatever it was. What did I do? I got up the next morning. I said, okay, I'll just do it again. Okay, and I had 4 out of the 10 exercise sessions was not very good, but there were 6 good ones. I'll just do it. Same thing in business.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the connection that I make to fitness too, man. It's like, so when you're in a fitness plan or you're working out or you're trying to do whatever it is, you have the process is the reason I say the process is more important because it teaches you that this is how you do things as this person. So if you're a person who's into fitness, if you want to be a fit person, you're going to eat a certain way, you're going to sleep a certain way, you're going to work out a certain way. That is what you're aiming for, not the end result. And so that if you can take that same blueprint and then apply it to something like a business, something doesn't go your way, a problem comes up, whatever, you're like, oh, well, I see myself as a business owner or an entrepreneur, and this is what we do. We handle these problems, we overcome these things. It's not like if you chase, if you try to chase the impossible scenario of never having problems in a business and just everything being smooth, like I don't feel that that's ever going to happen, and you're going to drive yourself crazy by trying to be there. But if you can just shift it and say, okay, well, instead of chasing that, instead of pursuing that, I'm just going to be the person who can handle these day-to-day things. Something comes up, I'm going to handle it. I'm going to have targets that we want to hit. I want to have goals, sales goals, all that kind of stuff. And it's obviously, a good thing to pursue that and try to have smooth transitions and things. But if your goal is to not have the problems, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And so that's why I say, like, that's what I love about fitness, is because it's something that's so simple that teaches you that blueprint that you can then apply to different areas. Like, oh, well, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. And then the end result is going to be a byproduct of that, not vice versa.
I mean, you're looking at a guy that would be dead right now if it wasn't for exercise, because
Right.
of how it evolved in my personality and all that. I walked away at the top of my game. Everybody's like, how can you just? I said, because I want to parlay what I learned about myself and into business. And so I wrote a book called Rich Trainer, Poor Trainer, how I made my first million as a fitness trainer off of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Right.
And I outlined, it was not about X's and O's. It was about being a sold out attitude. It was the psychology of it versus the X's and O's. But if I didn't have that exercise, Cody, number one, I probably wouldn't be here. I did have a farm life too. That discipline helped me out. But those 2 disciplines were the same thing in whatever piece of the pie, whether it's book writing, ministering, public speaking, professional performance coaching, whatever it is. It goes all the way back to my back of my brain of what discipline and what things did that exercise teach me. And I just put it into whatever business model it was.
Right.
I wrote it down, whatever it was, and it was very simple. And I just did it over and over again with different pieces of the pie, and it worked every time. And it wasn't complicated. So,
I want to ask you about this because we were talking about this earlier. I think you mentioned a steroid addiction and this kind of thing. So you're seeing a lot of people these days get into the gym, and I like to see that. I appreciate that. But you're also seeing a good portion of guys, very young guys, early 20s, mid 20s, who want to go down that steroid route. And I'm not the guy that's going to say that's right or wrong. I think that when people try to supplement with TRT or something like that, very, very young, there's a lot of things they should probably try before they do that. there's diet, there's sunlight, there's all these different things, sleep, there's all these different things I think you should try before you just go immediately to TRT. But with you kind of being, you had this, I think you mentioned an addiction. What would you say to somebody who maybe wants to explore that route? I mean, would you give them any advice or any sort of precautions as far as, hey, really think about this, or, whatever?
Well,
And
my addiction wasn't to the drug.
okay.
My addiction was what the drug gave me.
Okay.
So I wanted to fit in so bad. And in that sport, everybody was doing it. It wasn't going to happen to me. I'm going to be monitored, all that. So I started taking them. I was fortunate to not think more was better, like a lot of people. And so I wanted to be in this metaphoric locker room of wanting to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted purpose. I wanted some identity.
Right.
And the superficial side of bodybuilding at first helped with that. So, but then I realized once I got in, I'm still empty. And here was the interesting part. Every time I shot myself up and I put that needle in, it was something like I was taking a part of my soul out. Because I was trying to give myself something, and I'm not against them. I'm not for them. This is just my personal story. Everybody can do whatever they want to do. It's in every sport now. It's in all of that. I'm not condoning it. I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying, for me, I was willing to do that for some superficial reason because I wanted to be accepted. Once I got in there and became the professional, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And what was happening is my self-worth was being taken away every time I sucked that syringe out, and I didn't even know it. And next thing I know, I don't feel very good about myself. And then the reason I could walk away personally, because it wasn't my identity.
Right.
I got to the point where I didn't need the girl to look at me in my arms. And in a way, how I got that was the shot. So I didn't need that. So I was able to walk away from my addiction to the feeling. Because I think now that I'm talking about it a little bit, part of it was that business side. I could transfer my mind into the business side now versus the psychology side of being accepted. But you get that in every sport now, Cody. You get that in everything now. And it's the same thing. Why do we do anything that would jeopardize our health? Because we're a gang member, whatever it is. We just want to be accepted. And so the steroid thing was, well, it's not a regular drug. It's not like cocaine. I can stop anytime. And I'm not taking as much as everybody else is. And my cousin died of a steroid overdose connected with cancer, but it's not going to happen to me. And so I was thankful enough that I said, well, wait a minute. I need to step back here. How can I want to make some money now. I don't need this part of satisfaction. I want to make some money, and I want to parlay that into this. I don't need the drugs to make the money. So for me, I was addicted to the feeling it gave me as a low self-esteem kid growing up. And then once I got in there, I'm like, this isn't at all what it cracked up to be. As a matter of fact, it's kind of lonely.
Yeah.
When everybody's gone and the trophies are gone and the limelights and the magazine covers are all gone, this is kind of lonely.
Well, I imagine it is lonely because you're not present with yourself, because who you are in that moment is not, you're not connected to yourself. And I think that's a really good lesson that maybe we can apply to other areas. Whatever it is that you're trying to pursue, whether it's whatever these drugs give you, or a business or whatever, if you're trying to pursue that thing to make yourself feel better, first of all, you're probably not going to succeed at it. And secondly, if you do, it's not going to fill that gap or that void with yourself, when you do finally get there. So I think I think that what I'm hearing when I hear this, I think the message is to be present and be complete with yourself first, because if you're not, you're never gonna be fulfilled in these other things anyways.
Well, the other part too is that at the time I discovered my spiritual gifts,
Hmm.
and once I discovered that, I didn't need the drugs.
Right.
There was
Makes sense.
something about that. Once I discovered who I was and what I was good at, and then my motive was kind of money at the time, but a
Hmm.
business. Then I kind of forgot about the drug stuff. I'm like, well, this ain't so bad
Hmm.
because I was pursuing my God given ability, whatever that was,
Right.
to help other people. So
Um, Listen, man, I'm gonna let you get out of here in a little bit. Where can you be found? Do you have social media or website? I think you mentioned you have a book somewhere.
yeah, you can find all my books on Amazon.com. There's 40 of them. So,
Okay. All right.
you know, you can find there or Greg Patrick Ryan Facebook. Um, I don't do an Instagram account, and I'm transitioning into other arenas of doing things with public speaking and stuff. So my websites are getting all redone. So
Okay.
Greg Patrick Ryan Facebook, you can get a hold of me.
Okay. So one thing I usually ask everybody before we finish is if you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned. It can be from your personal life if it's something you're comfortable sharing, or a business lesson, or just anything that you feel a piece of wisdom to leave us with. What do you think is one of the most important lessons you've ever learned?
I think it's what we just talked about. The price of fitting in is not worth it.
Hmm.
It's just not. It's not gratifying. It's not sustainable. The most gratifying thing is when you discover who you are and what God gave you as far as your gifts. And when you discover that, everything else can, then it's the opportunity.
Right.
Then once the opportunity comes around and you mesh that with your gift, everything else takes care of itself. But it's not worth the price. You might think so, but it ain't worth the price of trying to fit in with some group because they just don't care.
Yeah.
So I think that was if I could tell my young self that at 18,
Hmm.
that and here's the funny part. Now I do the opposite. I want to be different. I
Hmm.
want to be that round peg in a square world.
Hmm.
It's funny because I just reversed the psychology, and I do better when I do the opposite of the herd,
Yeah.
whether in my business life or whatever. It's like it's so funny. It's like now I've reversed the psychology and went from shooting a needle inside of me to wanting to fit in to saying, how can I be different? How
Hmm.
how can I do something different and change the world?
You know what's crazy, man, is like I'm hearing you say this story, and I'm hearing your perspective on this, which I agree with. I think trying to fit in is probably not good, but I'm hearing this, and like what I hear is that if you try to fit in and if you try to be in this space, be somebody you're not, these other people might trust you, but you're not going to be able to trust yourself. And so you're not going to be true to yourself. And I just feel like, you know, I mean, I think getting along with people and respecting people is a whole different thing, but like trying to fit into a group and be somebody you're not, like, I don't know that you're ever going to be like whole with yourself, which is, I think, a huge, we were talking about earlier, the self awareness, the self authenticity. I think that's huge. I mean, that is, you had to, I feel like you had to be whole with yourself to be that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the organic thing. When things happen organically, like my wife's business or some of the things I've done or your podcast or whatever, there's something about something happen organically because you're not trying so hard.
Right.
Because when you try so hard, you're being somebody else you're really not. And that kind of goes against the grain of today's world. But we're seeing the repercussions of that, which is emptiness
Hmm.
and no authenticity and no transparency. That's the byproduct. That's
Yep.
the byproduct of us trying to fit in. Right there.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
that leads to a whole list of problems. I mean, you hear people like people who have, I've talked to people who have had addictions on the podcast, and you hear people like that do these life of crime type deals. And it's like this lack of purpose, that lack of connection, that I think that drives a lot of these things, these bad choices, especially as men, because I think as men we sort of need that connection with ourself, and like that driven purpose towards a thing. Because if not, it's easy to put that energy into other things that are really not good for you or anybody else.
Well, when you ask somebody, where we say somebody, your purpose is to serve in some way.
Mm-hmm.
You're serving with a podcast. I'm serving with a book, or I'm serving other people.
Right.
People get a little bit uncomfortable with that because it's not self-centered.
Mm.
My father had a 7th grade education. He couldn't write his name. He never owed a penny to a person in the world in 91 years, but he gave apples away every year and
Mm.
oranges. And he taught me about generosity. He would go and he would harvest a deer and he'd take it to the homeless people. He'd go down to the store and buy day old bread in truckloads and go give it to the homeless people. He'd give apples to everybody that came over on the farm. That was his gift that he didn't even know. But he served.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he didn't need anything in life. It came back to him.
Right.
And I think as men or just in general, we got to learn to serve. Whatever that vehicle is, just serve other people. That doesn't mean you're bad. It means, and it just empowers you. Take your mind off yourself and go. And that's what I tell people. There's another story. How I got that Denver Broncos job. I had a voice in my head 24 hours before that to go buy somebody a cup of coffee with the only coin I had in the bottom of my car. So I go buy this guy a cup of coffee, and the next day this lady calls me and says, "I was just thinking about you. Would you come work for us?" Well, when I tell that story to people, they say, "Well, was it the guy you bought the coffee for?" And I said, "No, I never saw him again. But I gave something away and I served somebody else, and a $4.51 cup of coffee got me a Super Bowl."
Wow.
That, and I don't mean it to brag, but I'm saying we're here to serve.
Right. Yep.
Okay, if you want to make yourself feel good, go buy somebody a cup of coffee. Go serve somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you're instantly taking off your mind to yourself. And if you can do that in a business, solving a problem, that's the gratitude, whatever you want to call it, whatever. But that's the thing. We're here to serve.
Well, and when you say it that way too, it makes your mission or your purpose or whatever it is that you're trying to pursue, it makes it that much bigger when you know that it's not just you're serving somebody or something or a group of people. It's outside of you. So it makes it that much more important. And I don't want to say it puts pressure on it, but it puts fulfillment to it. Like when you know that you're doing this thing and other people are going to benefit from it, it makes it, I feel like, not easier, but for lack of a better word, easier to do the hard things that it takes to make it happen. Because a family, even if it's something as simple as your own family that benefits from the thing that you do, that you are serving, that is still a huge thing, man. Like that's something that those people are getting that from you that they would not otherwise get if you didn't do the thing. And so that's huge.
Well, we started this conversation when I said to you that I got an email from a lady in Australia about her son. And what I said to you was, she said, "Thank you for sharing your story when my son needed to hear it the most."
Hmm.
I served her I served her son halfway across the world without even knowing about it. But 8 years before that, all I could think about was, "Oh, people are going to think bad of me about this, or they're going to think I'm a fruitcake or whatever as a man and all that."
Mm-hmm.
But when you be authentic, your little act of kindness can reach somebody halfway across the world, child, right when they need to hear it the most. That's why I buy the people a cup of coffee. I never see the people again. But maybe they go back 6 months later and they go buy somebody else a cup of coffee, or they do a random act of kindness, or they say, "Well, that was a kind of a nice thing to do." It's the old butterfly effect. That's the thing. If you knew that this podcast or whatever podcast you did was going to change 10 lives, 20 lives, 30 lives, you'd probably do 10 podcasts a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, if going to buy this cup of coffee is going to change that life and they're going to go change 20 more. Well,
Right.
What would you do? I'd take my whole budget and go buy people a cup of coffee 5 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know? That's like people say, "I want to write a book, but I can't write." I said, "Well, what if a life depends on it?"
Mm-hmm.
they said, well, I would go write it today. And I said, how do you know that's not true? How do you know this podcast that you're going to do next is not going to help a life? So that's what gets me out in the morning. It's like, what if?
Right.
What if this cup of coffee is just when that person needs? Or what if this story of my steroid addiction is just what this kid's going to needs, who's going to go take an anabolic steroid? What if? So who am I to drop a little bit of pride for somebody's life?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you or me or somebody listening to this, maybe they can't change the world, but maybe they can inspire somebody who can. Maybe they can inspire the next Elon Musk, or maybe they are the next Elon Musk. Maybe you're the next Elon. I don't know. But I think you mentioned it, the connection, the butterfly effect. I think that's a good way to phrase it, because it's like you don't know who you can touch and who your message, how it changes them. And like you said in that story, it could be the very thing they needed to hear. So
yeah. Well, it's like the owner of the Broncos. It was like, I just put my hand on his back and treated him like a human being.
Yep.
It changed him. It kept him alive for a couple years longer, maybe. I mean, people saw that. And so the other thing too is that it's not what you want, it's who you are.
Yep.
Discover those spiritual gifts, what you're good at. Be ready for the opportunity. Ask for the opportunity, not the results. Ask for the chance. And just take one day at a time. And then be different.
I love it, man. It's been a great conversation. I got to get out of here, though. I got to prepare for another thing.
Thank you for having me, Cody.
Yeah, man, it's been great. If you can hang out for just a second, I'm going to explain to you about the upload, but I do appreciate your time and insight.
Okay.
Hey, guys, I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. If you found this content or this episode useful and intriguing, you can visit us on social media. This is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. Pure Wisdom Podcast on all social medias. You can interact with us, follow, like, and share there, and we will see you guys next time.